we have been honored to present this meetup for him, along with him. So we're kind of honored, and I'm going to pass over the mic to another colleague of mine, and then he's going to introduce himself, and then finally we're going to introduce our guest who's going to present to us something that was presented during Dreamforce. Many of us did not have the opportunity to attend it, so finally we get to hear it from him during our meetup today. So over to you, Anubhav.
Thanks, Lavina. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, based on the time zones that you are in. So my name is Anubhav Mangla. I'm an associate solution architect at Caelius Consulting, based out of Dallas. I am passionate about APIs designing and development. Have been working in this MuleSoft space for more than 3 years now, and I also am a meetup leader for Frisco, Texas chapter. Today, James Parks is with us, and he'll be walking us through with the RPA use. Whatever is presented in the Dreamforce. So all of us are excited. Just to give you a little bit of background about him, he's a technical instructor at MuleSoft, and he helps students learn MuleSoft in his day-to-day life, and also contributes towards the curriculum for the RPA. Over to you, James. Thank you.
Sorry, I wanted to make sure my mic was down. Awesome. Well, first off, welcome everyone. My name is James Parks, as they were just saying. I want to just start by thanking everyone here today. I want to thank Lavina and Anubhav for welcoming me to this event. It's my honor to be here and bring Dreamforce to you. As they mentioned, I'm a technical instructor with MuleSoft. So in my day-to-day life, I do teach MuleSoft products. I primarily focus a lot on the development products. I teach Anypoint Platform Development Fundamentals all the time. I've probably taught it about 25 times in the past year alone, and also API design a lot. But I'm really passionate about MuleSoft automation. So we don't have an instructor-led class quite yet for that. Hopefully in the near future we will, but I've been trying to get my hands of MuleSoft automation as possible. And as part of that, I had the opportunity to present on MuleSoft automation at Dreamforce. And so I'm incredibly excited to bring that to you today. And I want to let everybody know before I even get started, while I'm sharing my screen, that I will be actively monitoring the chat for any questions. So if you do have questions come up, feel free to put those in the chat and I'm happy to answer them. I may wait a couple of seconds before answering them so I get to a logical stopping point, but I will address those questions, and there will also be time at the end of the presentation for any wrap-up questions should anybody have them. So with that, welcome everybody to Dreamforce to you, where I'm going to present how to automate workflows using MuleSoft automation. Now, if you're ever familiar with Dreamforce, all the presentations at Dreamforce always start with this forward-looking statement. So we always just want to remind people to please make purchasing decisions based on currently available products and/or features. So I wanted to bring that to you as well as part of this presentation. Also, everything you see in this presentation is protected under standard copyright laws. So I want to start by just giving an overview of what today's session is going to look like. So we're going to start off by just reviewing what automation is. And then we're going to discuss some of the challenges that companies face when they go about actually creating automations. And then we're going to talk about how MuleSoft automation helps to address these challenges. And then we're going to do a deeper dive into the different components of MuleSoft automation. Unfortunately, for time's sake, we don't have enough time to do an incredibly deep dive into each one, but we'll explore what the different use cases might come up for each of the different components of MuleSoft automation and how they fit together. And then we're going to end by exploring a realistic automation use case developed using all three components of MuleSoft automation. So let's start by just talking about what automation is. So according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, automation is the technique of making an apparatus, a process, or a system operate automatically, so without human intervention. So that's a lot. It could be a device or a bit of code to create some type of automation. In today's session, we're going to talk about what's called business process automation. Business process automation is the concept of taking a standard business workflow and automating it, either part of it or the full thing. In order to make this a little bit more concrete, what I want to do is explore a standard use case of a business workflow that individual employees at a bank might carry out in order to process a car loan, for example. So let's imagine Hans is applying for a new car loan to get a new car. The way the bank traditionally would apply this uh, would review this loan application, I should say, is Hans would email that loan application as a PDF attachment to an email, and someone at the bank would take that attachment and put it in a queue of documents to be processed. An agent at the bank would then have to manually review that document, taking a bunch of time to make sure no information is missing. And even worse, if they find any information missing, that agent would have to contact Hans to get the process to start over again with the updated information. But if all of the information is there, then the agent would manually approve the loan and enter Hans's information into the bank's CRM system, all before Hans can get that new car. There are two disadvantages to this approach. First off, it's very time consuming for the employees, meaning that it's riddled with rote tasks that really the employees would be better off having that taken care of for them. So that way they could focus on more mission critical tasks for the bank. The second downside to this approach is it's very timely or very time consuming for Hans because Hans wants to get that new car as fast as possible. And so, in order to provide a better customer experience, the faster we can get that car loan approved for Hans, the better. So, right now, with this time consuming process, Hans isn't that happy. So, what we can do is we can use automation to expedite this process. You can use task automation, which is the concept of automating a specific part of the business process, such as extracting the PDF attachments from those email addresses, from those emails, and adding them to the queue. And then you can do full business process automation, which is automating that business process from start to finish, which will really expedite Hans's ability to get that car loan approved, making Hans a satisfied customer. If you take this concept of business process automation to its natural limit, you get what's called hyperautomation. Hyperautomation is a goal that companies pursue by seeking to automate as many of their business processes as possible, really freeing up employee time to focus on those mission critical tasks that the company wants to pursue. So that's hyperautomation, business process automation, and task automation. But it sounds great, but I know many of you are sitting back there wondering, if automation is so great, then why hasn't every company already automated everything and already pursued that dream of hyperautomation? And it turns out you're right. I'd be lying to you if I said there weren't challenges that companies face when they try to automate their business processes. These challenges come in many different flavors, but generally they can be sorted into three separate categories: accelerating expectations, reduced budgets, and operating complexity. Accelerating expectations is just the recognition that companies' IT is facing an ever increasing set of demands, the need to transition to the cloud, do big data analytics, and so much more. Just one thing in this list of tasks is automating those standard business processes that your business users go through every single day. And because business users, while not efficiently, can perform these tasks, they typically aren't considered mission critical for IT, so they get placed on the back burner while IT focuses on those IT tasks that they have to perform in order for the company to continue to operate. Additionally, reduce budgets. We all know that, especially with today's economy, companies are having to do more with less. So they can't afford to hire more people in order to meet that accelerating expectation. As a consequence, again, those business process automations just aren't being addressed by IT. And then last but not least is operating complexity. In today's IT first world, every company has many different backend systems, and any given business process requires interacting with many of these different backend systems. As consequence, when you interact with those systems, you need to make sure you're doing so in a safe and secure manner. Thus, every single automation your company produces increases the overall operating complexity of your company's IT assets. Combined, these three different barriers drive a wedge or a chasm between companies' ability to deliver IT solutions and the overall needs of your company for those for those automations, those IT solutions and those automations to be able to drive your company to work faster and more efficiently. So, before we start talking about MuleSoft or anything else, what I want to do is I want to just take a step back and say, in an ideal world, how could we address each of these three cases? How could we address the accelerating expectations, independent of reduced budgets and independent of operating complexity? And then how can we address reduced budgets? And how can we address operating complexity? So let's start with accelerating expectations. In an ideal world, we could address accelerating expectations by being able to work on more things at once. So, if we could democratize our innovation, increase the number of people capable of producing automations, we could really address that accelerating expectations. I'm not saying put more people on the same project. We all know that having more chefs in the same kitchen slows things down. What I'm saying is have more kitchens with more chefs in them, producing more food at once. So too, in the context of automations, have more groups working on separate automations at the same time, helping you to meet that accelerating list of expectations. So I know that seems against reduced budgets. That's okay. Ideal world. Now let's talk about reduced budgets. So for reduced budgets, this one seems pretty intuitive to me. Of course, we can just address reduced budgets by doing more with less, working more efficiently, right? I mean, ideal world here. Not saying it's as simple as just saying, let's do more with less. But in an ideal world, if we could do more with less, then we would be able to meet that reduced budgets category of issues. And then for operating complexity, in order to simplify the complexity involved with adding new IT resources, we need to have some simple mechanism for adding governance and security and really just maintaining overall IT oversight of all of your IT infrastructure. So theoretically, each of these would address the corresponding issue. Not saying it's quite as simple as that, but if in a world we could address these three issues with these three solutions, then we should be able to bridge that chasm of despair we were just talking about, that chasm separating your needs of your company from the ability to meet those needs. And it turns out this is actually where MuleSoft Automation comes into play. MuleSoft Automation was specifically designed to help companies automate anything by empowering everyone. It's composed of three different components called MuleSoft RPA, MuleSoft's Anypoint Platform, and MuleSoft Composer that we'll talk more about on the next slide and the subsequent slides. But combine these three different solutions help companies to innovate faster by empowering not just IT, but also business users and knowledge workers who traditionally don't have coding experience to create automations through the use of clicks rather than code. It also helps companies to build solutions more efficiently by driving reuse of assets that you develop. And it helps you to ensure a more resilient infrastructure by having built-in security and monitoring mechanisms, helping you to maintain that IT oversight of all of your technical assets that you develop. MuleSoft Anypoint Platform, or MuleSoft Automation, I should say, does this through the use of 3 products. These are Anypoint Platform, MuleSoft Composer, and MuleSoft RPA. And I just want to talk a very little bit about each of these here, and then we're going to dive deeper into each of the products as we go forward. So let's start with Anypoint Platform. Anypoint Platform is a platform designed for your IT teams, so for a more technical audience, your developers, to be able to create really robust and complex systems integrations where you can integrate data from anywhere to anywhere, including data stored in the cloud, data stored on premise, and data that you have accessible via custom applications. Additionally, Anypoint Platform allows you to quickly and easily govern and secure all of your applications you develop with Anypoint Platform by a simple click of a button. So that's the IT team's side of MuleSoft Automation. On the business team's side of MuleSoft Automation, we are going to start with MuleSoft Composer. Sorry about that. So MuleSoft Composer is geared towards your business users, your users who are intimately familiar with all of those business processes that really need to be automated that IT doesn't have time to get to. And MuleSoft Composer empowers your business users to create these full end-to-end business process automations by snapping together pre-built components to connect to key business systems such as NetSuite, Jira, and Salesforce, all with clicks rather than code. And then you have MuleSoft RPA. MuleSoft RPA is specifically designed to automate all of those tasks that traditionally have been outside of the realm of coding. So automate tasks that require integrating with legacy systems that don't have uh, mechanisms to interact with programmatically, or extract data from images and documents. All of those things that are traditionally have been designated as human tasks. Additionally, it allows you to do this by creating these automations, again, using clicks rather than code, empowering business users to create many of these automations. Now, I do want to mention that MuleSoft RPA, some of the processes you create will be a little bit more complex than your traditional business user might be able to carry out. Some of them can be very robust and complex automations. So you may need to get IT involved for some of the MuleSoft RPA processes that you develop. That being said, there are built-in mechanisms to make sure that this integration of the business teams and IT teams happens securely, and smoothly, as we'll talk about in a second. The one last thing I want to mention, and is really what makes MuleSoft Automation stand out amongst all of our competitors, is that these 3 products integrate seamlessly with one another. So you're not required to just use MuleSoft Composer and not MuleSoft RPA or any platform. And you're not required to just use Anypoint Platform. You're not required to choose at the get-go which one you want to use. You can actually combine them when creating your automation solutions. So for instance, if you want to create a automation that will trigger anytime a record is created in Salesforce, and will take contents of that record, and actually, let me take a step back. As a better example, let's imagine we want to add some content to Salesforce anytime we have a PDF that has human written text in it, because I want to use MuleSoft RPA to extract out that human written text. But if we're receiving that PDF via an email attachment, and we want to process the contents and put it into Salesforce, what we could do is note that Gmail, it turns out MuleSoft Composer can interact with. Salesforce, it turns out MuleSoft Composer can interact with. So those MuleSoft Composer can handle. But the actual extraction of the data from that document is beyond the scope of MuleSoft Composer. That is something MuleSoft RPA is designed to do. So what we could do is we could create a MuleSoft Composer flow that triggers on the receipt of that email, and then calls the MuleSoft RPA process to process the contents of that email and send it back to MuleSoft Composer. And then MuleSoft Composer can take the data from that's been processed from MuleSoft RPA and write it to Salesforce. And I just saw that Anubhav uh, mentioned that you can feel free to post your questions in the QA section in the chat. Definitely feel free to do that. We can ask questions throughout the presentation or at the end of the presentation as well. So both will be okay. So feel free to ask those questions whenever. Okay. So combined, these three tools and the fact that they can interact with one another seamlessly allows your company to truly achieve the dream of hyperautomation, where you can use RPA to, again, automate all of those human tasks, MuleSoft Composer to create those simpler business process automations that integrate with your standard business systems, such as NetSuite and Salesforce, and then Anypoint Platform for creating all of your more technical integration solutions for integrating with SAP, databases, performing more complex data integration and transformation, etc. So that's MuleSoft automation at the high level. But what I want to do is go a little bit deeper into each one of the different components of MuleSoft automation to help make it a little bit clearer how to work with them. Again, we're not going to go as deep as possible into all of them. In fact, MuleSoft Composer is probably the one we're going to go the deepest into in this session, just because we have time limits. But we will talk at a high level about each of the different components, starting with MuleSoft RPA. So MuleSoft RPA, again, was designed to help automate repetitive processes and tasks that traditionally have been designated for human users because they interact with systems that don't have a traditional programmatic means of interacting with, such as applications that you need to use the UI. They don't have an API that you can use to interact with those applications, or documents that have human written text or images that you need to extract some data from that image. MuleSoft RPA allows you to automate all of these human tasks, again, using clicks and not code. Additionally, it allows you to collaborate as a team to create the automations of these MuleSoft RPA processes in a safe, secure, and trusted platform where it empowers you to designate specific members to contribute to different parts of the automation process when creating your RPA process. I know I just used the word process way too many times in that sentence. I'm sorry. Uh, but what this allows you to do is say, assign a business user who is intimately familiar with the RPA process that needs to be developed to record themselves performing that business process. And then they could pass this on, this recording, which gets automatically translated into a flow diagram of that process being performed. They can pass this along to whoever will develop the RPA process. That could be a business user for your simpler RPA processes, or a member of IT for your more complex for your more complex RPA processes. This allows you to really break down those silos of the automation procedure and really empower you to collaborate as a company rather than having business and IT butt heads because business wants IT to produce faster and IT feels they need to focus their efforts on more mission critical tasks. So through this collaboration, you can really achieve a higher level of integration as a company as well. And then last, but certainly not least, MuleSoft RPA allows your company to truly scale your automations that you develop with RPA. And allows you to do this by creating reusable, consumable building blocks out of your RPA process, which can then be consumed in your other automation solutions from MuleSoft Automation, including Anypoint Platform, Composer, and you can even call them from Salesforce. This allows you to truly automate all of those standard user tasks. And again, just to put it all on one slide, I want to talk through some of those standard user tasks that RPA is specifically optimal for. These include, for instance, integrating with legacy and modern applications to extract data or enter data into those systems if those systems don't have a programmatic means, an API to interact with. It also allows you to extract data from documents, web pages, PDFs, emails, etc., all of which were designed for human users rather than machines. Even if those documents contain human written text, you can still extract the data from them by using optical character recognition, or OCR. And then I want to take a step back and just make a note here. I know I've mentioned a couple of times you could use RPA to automate a specific step in a business process, maybe extracting data from a PDF document. However, it could be that you have a full business process that takes place across multiple systems, none of which have a programmatic means to interact with. As consequence, you would want to use RPA to automate that full business process, a multi-step process, even with conditional branches where maybe you use one system under one situation and another system under another situation. You can do that all with MuleSoft RPA. So it can handle more complex business logic or simpler business logic, allowing you to do either task automation or full end-to-end business process automation. In order to make MuleSoft RPA come a little bit more to life, I just want to show you one of the interfaces for MuleSoft RPA. This page is for MuleSoft RPA Manager, and MuleSoft RPA Manager is the primary management tool for MuleSoft RPA. In MuleSoft RPA Manager, it's built of a lot of different modules. These include the process evaluation module, which is where you can evaluate whether or not a business process would be valuable to automate. There's the process automation module, which is how you actually manage the automation throughout its development lifecycle. The process operation module gives you an operational overview of all of your company's automations developed with MuleSoft RPA. You can monitor your RPA solutions even as they're actively running using process monitoring. And there are a couple of more modules, including the alerting module, which is where you can designate alerts to be sent out if any issues arise, so that way you can respond to them quickly and efficiently. We'll see a little bit more about MuleSoft RPA coming up in a couple minutes when we go through our use case. So that's MuleSoft RPA. And now I want to talk about MuleSoft Composer. So MuleSoft Composer, again, is designed to help empower business users to automate full end-to-end business process workflows using clicks and not code. It allows business users to do this by empowering them to unlock data and connect applications instantly through the use of pre-built connectors, allowing you to connect to systems like Zendesk, Salesforce, Jira, NetSuite, Google Sheets, Workday, Slack, and many others. You can then snap together these different building blocks to create full multi-step, multi-user processes, again, using not a single line of code. These really empower business users to create really powerful automations quickly and efficiently, to create solutions such as customer 360 experiences, all by themselves without having to get IT involved. In order to prove how easy it is to work with MuleSoft Composer, I'm just going to jump over to MuleSoft Composer for Salesforce. There are two different versions of MuleSoft Composer. There's a standalone version, and there's one that's built into Salesforce. And functionally, they're equivalent. The UI is very slightly different. It's basically how you log in, and some permissions about where you set permissions are the primary differences between the two. But I'm going to just show you MuleSoft Composer for Salesforce, where I'm going to click Create New Flow in the top right-hand corner, and this will create a new flow. And when I create this new flow, what will happen is it will ask me a question. What should start this flow? Again, no coding experience required to answer this question. All I have to do is choose the system where the event will trigger my flow. Let's say I want to create a flow that will trigger anytime a case is created in Salesforce. And we'll then take that case and pass information about that case to Slack. Well, then I can choose the event to be Salesforce, and I can log into the Salesforce org I want to work with. I'm not restricted to just using this Salesforce org. I could use other ones by logging into them as well. I'm going to use this Salesforce org because I already have a connection made to it, so I can reuse that connection. And then it says, choose an event to start that flow. And then I click in the drop-down menu, and I can say, well, I wanted it to be a new case, so I'm going to select new record. And it says object type, so I said case. So I'm going to choose object type to be case. And then I could even apply a filter. So maybe I don't want to trigger on all cases, but maybe just cases associated with the specific owner. I'm not going to do that here, but I could set up that filter if I so desired. I can add additional steps by clicking the plus button where it says next step, and it says choose the system where the next action occurs, or where the action occurs, but that's referring to the this next step action. So I would want that to be Slack. I want that to be Slack. I could also, instead of choosing another action, I could do some conditional logic, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, using an if else block, or I could iterate over a collection of records. So let's say I have multiple records I've retrieved from, say, Salesforce. I could iterate over those records using a for each loop. Don't need to do that in this case because I'm just triggering and receiving a single record. So I'm going to choose Slack. Again, could log into my workspace. I already have, so I'm going to reuse that connection. And I can specify what action I want to perform. So if I just click that drop-down menu, I could say post a message to a channel and specify the channel and write the message. Again, you're seeing now that I can create this full end-to-end business process automation just by answering a series of questions that are prompted to me as I go forward. So that's MuleSoft Composer. And then last but not least in MuleSoft Automation is Anypoint Platform. So MuleSoft's Anypoint Platform, again, is geared towards your developers. It's geared towards your IT teams and empowers them through the use of the #1 integration and API management platform on the market today to quickly and securely unlock data and unify data from anywhere to anywhere, allowing you to truly integrate any of your company systems. And it allows you to be confident that the solutions that you're creating are secure by having built-in management and governance capabilities that can be implemented at a click of a button. This empowers your company to create seamless digital experiences faster. And furthermore, we want to truly help companies build faster. So we have created a series of pre-built assets to help your companies to get up and running, connecting to key systems like Salesforce and SAP quickly and efficiently. This is all done through the use of a uniform platform to help manage your applications, your automations throughout their full development lifecycle, from designing them to building them to deploying them, and ultimately operating them throughout their development lifecycle, or operating them throughout their lifecycle after they've been deployed, I should say. So performing standard management tasks such as adding security and governance. And then something that's really powerful about Anypoint Platform that many people overlook is this discover aspect of Anypoint Platform. So Anypoint Platform was designed to make it so you can reuse your assets that you build. And so it has built-in mechanisms to help you discover those assets so you can truly reuse them. All of this is done in a platform that was specifically designed to make this full life cycle as easy to manage and work with as possible. So it uses a single runtime, which allows you to simplify your operations of your assets. It uses a uniform interface, a unified tooling, which makes it so that everybody working with Anypoint Platform uses the same system. So it really simplifies that user experience. And it has unified management capabilities, allowing you to have deep visibility of all of your company's IT assets with end-to-end security built in place. And then once again, I mentioned Anypoint Platform is really about discovering those assets so that they can be reused by people throughout your company. With that in mind, there are easy mechanisms to share those assets so that your company can, again, reuse them so you can more rapidly develop, you can more rapidly innovate. Now, Anypoint Platform is a really robust system. As a consequence, we don't have time to go into all of its complexities here today. What I will do is just show you two parts of Anypoint Platform, and we'll talk a little bit more about an application that was developed with Anypoint Platform here in a second. But one part of Anypoint Platform is Runtime Manager, which is where you deploy your applications using Anypoint Platform to your Mule runtime. And then you have Anypoint Exchange. Anypoint Exchange is the area in Anypoint Platform that you can share your IT assets from. I'm going to just show a couple of different views of Anypoint Exchange. One is the provided by MuleSoft section, where there are many different components that have been developed by MuleSoft to help your company more quickly get up and running when working with MuleSoft, to connect to systems like Salesforce, Amazon S3, MongoDB, Twilio, Redis, and many other systems. And then you have your company's internal Anypoint Exchange, which is where you can find all of your company's own IT assets. One of which you'll see listed on my screen is the tables to object asset that we'll be seeing again here in just a second. And with that, we've now talked a little bit more about each of those different components. But it's really hard to understand how MuleSoft Automation actually works without seeing a use case. So what I want to do now is actually talk through an automation use case where we're going to automate document processing. So let's imagine I'm a member of a sales team at my fictional company, and marketing for my company regularly hosts events, and they want to get as many potential leads as possible for us to act on. So they don't like to turn anyone away. As a consequence, when they host these events, they allow anyone who shows up at the door to enter, and even if they weren't signed up in advance. So when they enter, everyone who wasn't signed up in advance, they want to gather their information. So they have them fill out a simple sign-in sheet. Let me show you an example of that sign-in sheet. So that sign-in sheet just looks like what you're seeing on your screen. It's just first name, last name, company, phone number, and email address, all where the attendee will just fill out their information. What will happen is when marketing takes that sign-in sheet after the event has occurred, they will scan it and attach it to an email and send it to me. I'm then responsible for taking that PDF, extracting all of the leads from it, and if those leads do not exist in Salesforce, writing them to Salesforce, and then I also go ahead and notify a sales leads Slack channel in my company so we can really act on those leads as fast as possible. But this is a really time-consuming process because I have to translate that human written text, create the leads in Salesforce, and then once again, create the messages in Slack. So I want to automate this. So it's interacting with Gmail, Salesforce, and Slack, all of which MuleSoft Composer can interact with. And because I'm a member of sales, I'm not a technical expert. So this suggests I might want to use MuleSoft Composer, but then I notice a hiccup. MuleSoft Composer can't process human written text. That's more of a job for MuleSoft RPA. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use MuleSoft RPA to automate the extraction of that human written text using task automation. And then I'm going to use MuleSoft Composer wrapped around that RPA process to trigger on the receipt of the email, invoke the MuleSoft RPA process, take the results from that MuleSoft RPA process, write them to Salesforce, and send the Slack messages. So let me actually show you that MuleSoft Composer flow. I already have it pre-built, but we're actually going to go through step by step and just talk through it. So it starts with the trigger, which is just on a new email in Gmail, and where I've specified the event that starts the flow to be a new email being created. And I specify a filter criteria. So I don't want to trigger on every email I receive. I only want to trigger on some emails that have a certain condition that contain the word meetup and contain has attachment. Now, with this in mind, you might be sitting back thinking, wait a second, as a business user, will I know how to write this filter? Turns out this filter is really just the search bar of your Gmail account. So if I search Meetup has attachment in the search bar, that's what the filter criteria is doing. It's just using this same top section here. And you can see how many times I've actually tested out this workflow that we're going through. But so if you can know how to write a search in Gmail, you can know how to write a filter for this Gmail component. The next task is to invoke our RPA process to take the human written text and extract it out. So we're going to invoke an RPA process called marketing leads and use the response in this MuleSoft composer flow, rather than I could use it in another one if I so desired. I could break my composer flow up, but I want to use it in this one. And I'm going to pass it some input information. I'm going to pass it input information in the form of the subject. I want to pass it the email subject so it knows what email, so the RPA process knows what email to process. Now I'm going to go look at that RPA process for a second. The RPA process is pretty simple. It connects to my email account using a mail session. It then reads the email specified by that subject. It downloads all of the attachments and iterates over those files. And for each one of them, it will call the tables operation from AWS, Text React, from AWS Text React. Now, the format given back by this tables operation is not natively understandable by Composer. Composer will struggle with it. Let me show you that output. It's this array of arrays structure where each array corresponds to a row in my table. And the elements in that array correspond to the cells in that row. So the first cell, the second cell, so on and so forth. But in my table, first name, last name, company, phone number, and email, and generally many tables, if you're having human written information, that will contain the header. That will contain the header. And then the next row will contain your first bit of data, and the next row will contain your second bit of data. And we want to be able to put this into a format that's more easily consumed by Composer. So what it turns out we did as a company in this fictional company is we recognize that many different business processes need to work with these human written filled out tables. So rather than making every single RPA process that consumes that data have to write its own custom transformation to take that data and put it into a format the composer can understand, IT decided to simplify their lives by making it so that way they create a single web service that they could put sitting there on the web that people inside of our company can make calls to convert the data coming from the tables operation from AWS Text React and transform it into a format that Composer can work with. This way, a business user can create the automation. A business user can actually create the automation in the RPA process because it doesn't do any too complicated of data transformations. So they created this text to objects, there's table to objects process, which takes the input data in the format of the output of Text React and transforms it into a format that Composer can understand, which is just an array of objects where the keys correspond to the columns and the values correspond to the row entries. So this is a format Composer can understand. And now the business user doesn't need to know how to build up this output. All they need to know is that once they get the output from tables with AWS, they can call the tables to object function web service that IT has built to transform it into a format Composer can work with. And then they can store that in a variable which can be passed back to MuleSoft Composer. And then they can do some cleanup operations, just deleting any files that exist or that they downloaded. That response then comes back to Composer, and we can iterate over all of the records that were retrieved, that array of records, that array called marketing leads. And for each one of them, we'll want to check whether or not a lead already exists in Salesforce. So to check whether or not they exist in Salesforce, MuleSoft Composer is just going to do what a user would do. Access Salesforce and see if it finds any leads that match the lead that we're currently processing. So it does a get request for leads from Salesforce checking whether or not there are any leads in Salesforce that share the same first name, last name, and email address. If it does, we'll return some leads. If it doesn't, we'll return no leads. So we have a decision to make. If we find no leads, then we may want to write the lead to Salesforce. If we don't find any leads, if we find some leads, we don't want to write the lead to Salesforce. So let's consider the case where we do want to consider writing the lead to Salesforce. So when we found no leads, so when list of leads is empty. It turns out Salesforce has a couple of requirements for creating leads, which is that last name and company can't be empty. For a lead in Salesforce, last name and company must be provided. So we also add some additional conditions before we try writing the lead to Salesforce. We first check whether or not last name is not empty and if company is not empty. Because if last name is empty, that means we can't write the last name. If company is empty, we can't write company to Salesforce. So we just check whether or not those are empty. And if those are both not empty, so we have a last name and we have a company, and if the list of leads is empty, so the lead does not already exist in Salesforce, then we want to create the lead in Salesforce. So again, just filling out the different fields. We then come down and create the lead in Salesforce by just adding a Salesforce action step, which creates a new record in Salesforce of type lead and just fills out the information from the specific lead we're processing. The company, last name, email address, first name, phone number, and also a description, which basically says where the lead comes from. Um, Great question coming up in the chat that I'll go ahead and answer now. How are errors handled in MuleSoft Composer? So by default, there are no mechanisms for handling errors. Basically, what will happen at runtime if an error occurs is you'll get a log that will basically say this run of MuleSoft Composer through an error. So as of right now, there is no way to create user-defined error handling. It will just return an error to your logs as of right now. Great question. So you then come down, and after we've created the lead in Salesforce, we can send our message to Slack. And it's as simple as just configuring it to post the message to a channel, specifying the channel name, and then writing the message using the building block data points from our leads. And with that, we've created our flow. So I'm just going to test this flow out because I want to prove to you it works. So I'm going to click the test button. Now, while it's starting it up, while it's allocating those resources, I want to prove to you that the data doesn't already exist in Salesforce. So I'm going to refresh my list of leads in Salesforce. See, none of the leads from that PDF are currently in Salesforce. And also in Slack, you'll notice the sales lead Slack channel also currently has no leads in it. So what I want to do is I want to cause MuleSoft Composer to start running. So once it's allocated the resources, when I'm running a test, I have 10 minutes to trigger my automation to run. To do that, I'm just going to send an email to myself, which meets the condition. So I'm going to click send. And it's going to take a second to run. So it takes a second to trigger the automation. When it has triggered, this testing countdown will turn into the word processed. So just a second, it'll start processing it. And then this automation in particular takes a couple of seconds to run because it does invoke a MuleSoft RPA process, which means it has to call that MuleSoft RPA process. That MuleSoft RPA process then has to download the attachment of that email and then pass it to AWS Text React, where AWS Text React will take that document, process it, and send the response back to my RPA process. And then the RPA process will invoke the web service to convert that into the format that can be understood by Composer. And then it finally sends that back to MuleSoft Composer. This does take a couple of seconds, and because I'm running it in test mode, it takes a slightly longer than it would if I had activated it. But what I want to mention here is that MuleSoft Composer and MuleSoft RPA aren't designed to be the most efficient coding mechanism. If you want high efficiency, you're probably looking at Anypoint Platform. What they're designed for is to be faster than a human user performing the task to free up the employee to spend their time on mission critical tasks rather than this rote process. So it still is definitely faster than the employee, writing those leads to Salesforce and Slack messages. And it frees that time up for the employee. So you'll notice that it said my tests finished successfully, and I want to prove to you that it did finish successfully by just coming to MuleSoft, coming to my list of leads and refreshing the list of leads. And you'll now see all of my leads are present. And also in my Slack channel, you'll see all of those leads have been written to my Slack channel. Again, MuleSoft Composer has some limitations. You have to recognize those limitations when you're starting to choose to develop with it. So if you need complex error handling, as the question just a second ago asked, you would want to potentially consider using Anypoint Platform rather than using MuleSoft Composer. So you always have to weigh those trade-offs, and that's why we offer this suite of automation products, because they can work together to help make it so you can automate anything given your company's needs, rather than you having to work with just one of the solutions and working with that one no matter what. So combine these really empower your company to automate anything and empower anyone throughout your company to contribute to the creation of those automation solutions. And so with that, we finished a full business process automation. So I just want to wrap up by reminding you what we covered in today's session. We began by talking about what automation is. We then discussed the challenges companies face when automating and introduced MuleSoft Automation as a concept and explored the different components. We then reviewed a basic automation use case. I want to remind you that there are many different ways for you to continue learning on your own. So we have trails for both MuleSoft RPA and Composer on Trailhead, as well as training that you can do on training.mulesoft.com. And there's extensive documentation on both on docs.mulesoft.com. And then we have many classes available for Anypoint Platform. And yes, we can share the slide deck with the audience. We can do that. So I will get you that information, Lavina, so we can pass that along. So with that, thank you. If there are any questions, I am happy to answer them. I really appreciate all of the time, and thank you everyone for coming. Feel free to add any questions to the chat. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, James, for taking time out and presenting this back to all of us who were not present at Dreamforce. So truly appreciate your time to us. Thank you so much for everyone joining in. This was a really informative session for all of us to learn about the upcoming MuleSoft automation. It's a really good platform that is being put together by MuleSoft. It was just launched in August. Is that right, James?
Sorry, say that again.
It was launched in August, right? August 1st was when it was launched. Yes.
So MuleSoft Automation was launched in August. MuleSoft Composer has been around a little bit longer.
Sure.
So MuleSoft RPA, that final component, was launched in August. Yes.
Correct. So so this was really helpful. Seeing a use case, seeing it actually in action, I think was the best part for me. Just seeing how the whole thing kind of comes together. So thank you very much, and thank you to the audience for joining in. I think we'll still be around for. Oh, I see. There's one more question.
Yes. I was about to address that, so thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
So somebody asked in the chat if we want to automate repetitive tasks like a code checklist in a MuleSoft Studio project using RPA, is that possible to integrate? So there are a couple ways you could probably integrate that using RPA. Again, I'd have to think about the exact process that you would go through. As long as it's a standard procedure and every single time you go through and do that code checklist, you perform the same series of steps, you can definitely automate it. If there's judgment calls where like, I'm not certain how I'll perform in any given situation, it's not conditional logic where you go one way or another route, then it's probably not a good candidate for automating. But if it is conditional, so maybe you perform this checklist under this condition or this checklist under this condition, then you could write an RPA process to perform that code check if you so desired. Yeah. Great question.
So great, thank you, James. So what we're going to do is once James shares the link, I will, myself or Anubhav will go ahead and upload it onto Bloomfire as well, which is a repository for all the information related to MuleSoft. And I'll also send in a mass email to everyone who attended the session today, and be sure to, and you should get it in your inbox as well, along with a recording of today's session as well, just in case if you want to go back and review some of the things that were discussed today and presented by James. So that's it from our end. Thank you, James, once again for your time. This was a really helpful session.
Great. It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you everyone again for coming. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Stop sharing my screen.